Hey everyone, this is a clip from a recent episode of the Men of Steel podcast where we talk about Superman and Superman adjacent topics. If you enjoy this clip, check out the podcast. You can find it at certainpov.com or wherever you get your shows. So why don't we pick up with Adventures of Superman 498, which is the immediate follow-up to Superman Dead. And that is like literally them trying to figure out like, what are we going to do with the body? Like, can they even pick up Doomsday? Can they do all these things? Yeah. So there's a lot of emotion going on for the characters in this all. Like Superman is dead. They're trying to, I do appreciate very much them being like, is Doomsday dead too? Yeah. Like there's a lot of fear about that one. Cause like we know that they died together in this fight, but like, as far as they know, it's like, wait, that thing just killed a lot of people and it is lying there, but is it done? And there's a few points where it like kind of moves.
Yeah. I liked how much of this issue was literally them trying to bring him back, finding ways to bring him back.
Yeah.
And it's basically like a 24-page CPR session basically this whole issue,
much, yeah.
Which I was like, this is great. Like they're just like, can we do this? And it kind of addresses a lot of questions people have about Superman, which I thought was kind of cool. Like, you know, we can't inject anything because we can't break his skin. I'm like, that's true. Like, It reminds me of the post Civil War story with Luke Cage where he had a heart attack and they couldn't get in there and save him because his skin's impenetrable. And I was like, yeah, that's really cool. So I had forgotten this whole issue had happened, by the way. I did read it at one point, but I completely forgot this happened until we reread it. So
yeah, I mean, it's such a follow-up. Like, you know, it's Guardian trying to give CPR to Superman and being like, oh man, I can't even tell if I'm inflating his lungs at all because they're like so strong. And then them coming up with increasingly stronger things to try to like shock him back to life, to shock his heart back up, and how it just keeps on not working because like nothing's strong enough. And then like eventually they're like, all right, well, we've belted the paddles. Let's bring in, let's get a force field belt on and let's like set up like a supercharged reactor and go.
This kind of reminds me of I don't know if you remember Superman Returns, after he falls from like the stratosphere. And they take him to the ER and they're like trying to like stick him with the needles and trying to resuscitate him, and it blows out the entire hospital's fuses. And I was like, oh, that's where they got it from.
Also, one thing that, because I'm not an avid Superman reader, I do read some Superman books pretty fervently, but this era I wasn't really into Superman. I forgot how gigantic of a supporting cast this character has.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Like I'm like, who? And I'm like, oh yeah, Gangbuster. I remember Gangbuster.
I had no idea who that guy was.
And it's like, and I know Guardian obviously, but then like all these guys, and I'm like, who is? And I had to keep like Wikipediaing names because I'm like, who's this? And I kept having to remind myself of some of them, and I was like, oh yeah, and yeah, that was very interesting. Yeah, this issue specifically drops you in the deep end with that cast.
And this whole book in general feels very much of here's the soap opera of Superman's supporting cast in a world without Superman. You know, like how are they all responding to his lack? And so it's good that we get this reminder of it all. I mean, we talked about how the comics are in a way feel like a victory lap of like, here's all the cool things that they had done with the character post Man of Steel. You know, like they had introduced a much more robust supporting cast. There's a lot of characters out there. There's a lot of things that are out there. They've managed to incorporate like the Jack Kirby stuff into like the modern era stuff. You know, like we've got a universe that these characters are living in and why Superman's important. So, and then with his absence here, now it's like, all right, now how do they see the world now that he's gone? Because, you know, not surprisingly, the big fight where we're mostly focused on Superman and his inner monologue, like we're seeing the world from his perspective. Yeah. And now it's everyone else kind of looking at this. I had this thought when I was reading this issue, particularly when Gangbuster shows up, but it's not just about him. It's that it's almost like they had filled up Superman's world with like the B-list version or like knockoff versions of everything else out there.
Yeah.
Like Guardian is kind of like Captain America. Gangbuster is a Batman type vigilante. Like the world that he's existing in, he's so robust and so important that everything else like is just an orbit around them. And so in order for them to really take the spotlight, they need to not be part of the Superman world. And that's why Guardian has like gone off and been more of his own character in more recent years, especially like when Grant Morrison like decided to take the character and have him be like his own thing. And thus is more of its own unique property versus like here it's like, oh yeah, well it's this is the Captain America for Superman City, and this is the Batman for Superman City. And then here are the Morlocks for Superman City, and here's like all these like lesser versions.
I do not recollect those Morlocks at all, and I was like, "What's the Morlocks doing here?" Like that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it's exactly that. Being written by Louise Simonson.
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
Remember, if you like the clip after you're done liking and subscribing, check out certainpov.com, where you can find more episodes of the show as well as a ton of other great shows.